In Immersion, one can find an adventure or a release, a chance to learn or a new perspective. Today, we are joined by the founders of the Speakeasy Society. After 7 years of immersive creation, they have gained an understanding of the true value of play. I give you Genevieve Gearhart, Julianne Just, and Matthew Bamberg-Johnson.
Freedom that play provides, even within a structure.
As the guest, you are essential to the story being told.
By nature, play means you are involved.
I'm a little nervous to play.
It is an experience that you are in the center of.
You have importance.
You are seen.
I believe he was a Vietnam vet.
Play brings back and brings
he
in.
had gone away to war against his mother's wishes. He was given the opportunity to say goodbye to his mother in a way that he was never able to in his actual life.
Hi, I'm Nathaniel Sky, the host of the Immersion Nation podcast. Here, the masters of immersive experience create and conjure, muse, and imagine the cultural revolution that is unfolding before us. That is immersive entertainment. Welcome. Welcome to the show, you guys. Great to have you on.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Pleasure to be here.
So, for context of the audience, could you in turn potentially say your name so that folks can identify you to and with your voice, and tell about what fictional or fantasy world you would choose to live in if you had to choose one?
Sure. Okay. I'll go first. So I'm Genevieve Gearhart. There are so many worlds that I would be super interested in exploring, but I was thinking about this, and as something that I've just been watching recently, and as an actor also I'm excited about and would be fun to play in, is it's a kind of more poppy reference, but the sci-fi TV show The Magicians. I love that it's a combination of what we know as our world interlaced with magic, with the opportunity to explore completely other fantasy realms that are entirely different from the world we know. And as someone who enjoys choreography, I love the style of their magic, like the way that their hands like create the positioning for magic, and I think that would be a fun place to live in.
I really like that perspective on it. I have not actually seen The Magicians, but you definitely have me interested.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Not the most serious of shows, but fun.
Sometimes you need a little fluff in your life.
Yeah.
I don't know. We've gotten pretty emotionally invested in The Magicians. Don't lie, Jeff.
Fair enough.
I guess I'll jump in next. I'm Matthew. When you asked that question, I jumped back to something from my childhood that I haven't thought of in a really long time. I was kind of a nerdy kid growing up, still am a nerdy kid. And one of my favorite book series was actually a spinoff of kind of the D&D universe of Dragonlance, and specifically the Forgotten Realms series. And I don't know, I love that high fantasy world, the presence of magic, the way that you can kind of access issues of prejudice in modern society through kind of the racial dynamics of these different groups that look absolutely nothing like us as humans. You're moving beyond issues of different human classes discriminating against each other, and then entirely different species. And I just jumped back there for some reason. That was something that was like really formulative in my imagination, and I grew up in kind of rural areas, so spent a lot of time running through the woods with sticks, pretending to have swords or magic staffs or various things of that nature. So That's
Oh
what
yes. Oh yes. Where'd you grow up, out of curiosity?
I was born in Vermont, but I grew up in southern Indiana, just outside of Bloomington. So our property abutted a state forest, and I would run around with my dogs in the woods in the afternoons.
Wonderful. Yeah, lots of space for adventuring through the um Forgotten Realms there.
Indeed.
Um I never was, or I'm not super familiar with Dragonlance, but definitely have played inside of Forgotten Realms
Yeah.
quite some time ago. So that's awesome. Definitely can connect with that to a degree. Um, yeah, thank you.
And my name's Julianne, and I guess I'll take it kind of in a slightly different direction. But I would, I guess, want to spend some time in the world of like Edith Wharton's Age of Innocence, sort of kind of a Victorian era. That one, it's Victorian era and New York, which I think it kind of had an interesting impact locationally on the idea of kind of what it was to live in that era, because obviously America was still kind of early in its history. We still are early in our history. But yeah, I enjoy a little Victorian era.
Oh yes,
A
Victorian era is
lot of
perpetually a great backdrop.
urges you can't act on, and a lot of longing.
Yeah, yeah. That's wonderful. The I think there's definitely there's a lot of imagination around, I feel like, that social context of Victorian era that has produced a lot of really interesting ideas in fiction consideration of social constructs and such.
Yeah, and visually it's beautiful, but also I think it's one of those eras that, there's no part of me that really wants to live in that era. I feel glad that I'm not living then, but as an era that I might want to visit or explore in another setting or in a temporary way.
Yeah, certainly. Just a peek behind the curtain
Yeah.
there. Um, all right, well, wonderful. Thank you guys for starting us off like that. From there, to jump into something somewhat immediately meaty, so to speak. Um, for context, for another little bit of context here, what kind of experience are you trying to give to the guests slash players slash audience that participate in your shows? And I know you've done so many different shows, so like, is there a kind of common theme of what your creative impetus, either together or individually, orients towards?
Yeah, I was thinking about this today as it relates to kind of the definition of immersive, because there are so many different definitions of immersive, and many companies working in the form um, position themselves differently in relationship to that word. And one thing that I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that is sort of a hallmark of our version of immersive is that you are essential as the guest. You are essential to the story being told. It could not be told without you being in the room. So we really want to make sure that you feel essential to the experience, um, like you are completing the loop of the narrative. Uh, and were you not present, that this action could not take place.
And I think that's something that we have been evolving with as we continue to grow and we continue to work on new material. And I think we're finding a stronger and stronger sense of that with each project. So as maybe some of our earlier work, you weren't necessarily as, you were always vital, but maybe your character wasn't very specified or there was fluidity in who you were. I think as we continue to move further on in what we're working on, we're really kind of delving into who is this guest, whether we get to make that choice or whether you as the guest get to make that choice. But knowing that we know as the creators who you are, and knowing that you know as the guest who you are and what you're able to accomplish in that world, and that what you're able to accomplish or experience or contribute is vital and is, yeah, exactly what Matthew said, completes the kind of feedback loop.
And I think we hope by defining kind of what your role is or letting you define it, that then establishes kind of the parameters or rules for the experience. Because that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately is the idea of like, so you have something that's immersive, but immersive is different than necessarily engagement within the immersion. And so I always think about the idea that we get nervous sometimes, I think, if we aren't asking the audience to interact for too long. But then it's like I think about how there are situations where within your role, playing the role of witness is actually a very active role and necessary role for the interaction happening. We have a show for an audience of one called that's loosely inspired by the Strindberg play The Stronger, and that is very much about you being invited into a situation to kind of witness an interaction. And there are moments where you interact with it kind of verbally, but a lot of it is about your presence there to account for this happening.
That one's an interesting one because even though you aren't always asked to participate verbally, sometimes you are, but the presence and the energy that you bring as an audience member definitely affects the performance of the two actors, and maybe which way they kind of emotionally and tonally take the script. So it's sometimes you don't need to necessarily say or do something to have an impact on what's happening. We as performers can sense how you are taking in the material and how you are reacting to it, and we can use that as we move forward through the story as well.
And I think that's one of our big goals anytime we're building a production is that in that role that the audience takes on, that built into that role is kind of an understanding of how that role would interact then in that narrative or in that environment.
Yeah. Understanding the persona of an audience, whether the agency and the creation of that is on the part of the experience designer or on the part of the audience, is a really big determinant factor there in so many ways. And that is to say, I mean, to what you're speaking to on both sides of that, it's like it's a matter of degrees, but one way or the other, there's still a component, even in something where there's not a direct piece of agency. Just the kind of intimacy of social space creates a context for things to change, even in subtle ways.
Definitely. And I think part of what Julianne was getting at in the end of what she just said as well is part of the mission for us then becomes how do we provide that social cueing in an onboarding sense? Because I think another hallmark of our work is we generally don't like to make people feel like they are making incorrect decisions, right? That's not, it's not about embarrassment. I think sometimes when people think about immersive, they're afraid that they're being dragged up on stage at the hypnotist's show and being made to cluck like a chicken, and we want to be the antithesis of that. So we want to make sure that as a guest you're provided with all of the tools and understanding that you need to be able to successfully function within the world that we're creating.
Yeah, creating enough of a cushion, enough of a flexible environment where it can be yes and instead of having a really massive ask from the audience. Which actually, now that you say that, I feel like is very much the mentality that a lot of high agency um immersive theater takes on it, but it makes me wonder the degree to which, as audiences become more aware of how the whole thing works, if there will be kind of some new doors open insofar as, okay, you can ask a little bit more from the audience. You can expect them to know a little bit more coming in or something of that nature, which, of course, like, say, speaks to the onboarding process of something like tension experience and that whole host of experiences in that ethos being like, oh, hey, they have this whole like pre-context of an ARG that serves as an onboarding experience, because I think that that's definitely something I've heard a lot of people finding different ways to interface with that onboarding process, because it's tricky. It's tricky getting or asking that of an audience.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that extends the boundary to which you can play with certain audience members. But another thing that we are careful of is when, when we created the Kansas collection, which was the episodic series related to the mythos of the Wizard of Oz, there was a lot of outside of performance content, puzzles and videos and letters and kind of hidden nuggets that would help enhance and increase your relationship to the story. But I think we always operated under the assumption that people had not read or participated in that material. So we want to make sure that even if you're walking in having done no prior work or investment in the framework that we've laid out, you're still going to have a satisfying narrative experience. Now, the people that do engage in that deeply, they have information that the other guests don't, and that gives you a lot to play off of. And particularly in Kansas, I feel like the interactions that some guests have had with characters are really rich because they feel emotionally invested because they've done work in a way by solving puzzles or traveling to various places or they just feel like they have a very particular personal connection to the characters, and that was something that was really special about that series for us.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. The dynamic of having some people in experience that have had so much time and learning put into an ethos, into a world that you guys have created, and then having some people who are just showing up completely, new to the whole thing potentially. And I'm going to use that to segue into this idea of uh, play, insofar as I think that insofar like onboarding, it has this dynamic where I feel like play is very undervalued in our culture. And I wonder if that's part of the barrier between traditional entertainment and immersive entertainment, specifically immersive high agency theater. So what do you guys see as the value of play?
Ooh, I mean, I think it's the one of the main reasons why we create the work that we create. Because if we weren't interested in play and that the feeling that play kind of brings back and brings up, I don't know, maybe we'd be creating films that make a lot of money. or we'd be sitting back doing something a little easier. Everything we do revolves around play because play, by nature, play means you are involved. You can't play something in a passive way. That's watching or observing. But if you are playing, it's active. And I think, when we first got interested in immersive work, that was what kind of sparked joy for us. The three of us came from a more traditional theater backgrounds, and we had been working in theater for a long time, and we were ready for something different, and we were introduced to this world where we were actively allowed to become part of the story in a way. And the agency that play provides and the freedom that play provides, even within a structure, is so much more exciting than sitting in a seat and observing. And I really think that basic word is the groundwork for everything that we create. Without it, there's nothing there. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely. Thank you.
You know what that also makes me think of? I was able to go up to the Immersive Design Summit hosted in San Francisco this past year, and one of the keynote speakers, Jenny Weinblum from Meow Wolf, she was talking about how immersive theater can also serve an important social justice function because we learn by doing as humans. So, in a sense, there's a responsibility that you have as a creator to, think about the habits that you are encouraging audience members to practice through play. And so she uses the phrase rehearsing for the revolution. I think about practitioners like Augusto Boal with Invisible Theater, whereby, he works with or worked with communities that were experiencing some kind of difficulty or oppression, and through theatrical lenses, through imagination, through play and simulation, is able to find solutions to real world problems. And while not everything that we do really is approaching social justice issues that deeply, I think that's something that I certainly have in the back of my mind as we're playing with audiences, is what are they playing doing, and what does that do for them, and what does that do for the story as a whole. So just another kind of take on that question.
And I think that very much ties into your answer with the Forgotten Realms there, because insofar as speaking to the different, the different mythical races in that as a different way to interface with the problems of our world and the way that our culture handles that. That's actually a second time that I have heard Jenny Weinblum's name come up, and I'm very, very interested in her perspective on all that, because it seems like her thoughts at the Immersive Design Summit impacted very broadly. So thank you for bringing that up.
Of course.
I also think there's an interesting idea of so there's play, and then there's the nature of play. And, speaking for myself as an adult, as an adult in our very kind of a passive screen-based culture, I have a desire to play, but I also, I'm a little nervous to play. And so I think that's something we also strive to set up, is a space that it's a space of play, because it's a space where you have to be present and engaged, but also we, in a lot of our shows, try to set it up so that you know how to play, and that we're actually going to try to guide you into what could be the most emotionally satisfying or narratively satisfying sequence of events in that experience. So in a way, there's elements of it that it's play with your handheld. And because I think that's something for us, we always talk to our actors about is, if it's a group experience, usually the audience is very varied. Some people are really putting themselves out there, as others are maybe kind of hanging back a little bit. But sometimes, the people who are hanging back, it's not necessarily because they're not interested or not interested in being engaged. They're just maybe nervous about not knowing how to, or about not doing it correctly. So I think that's also one of the really interesting opportunities within Immersive, is that in a way you have a chance to kind of hold someone's hand and reteach that.
Yeah.
Because I, just as an immersive theater audience member, that's one of the things I love about it, is that I've been able to kind of experience situations and do things in those situations, or live through situations that I would maybe never be in or find myself in, or be within that situation, allow myself to maybe experience a more kind of outwardly emotional journey in that space.
Yeah. And in many ways, we live in a society that has forgotten how to play, that has eschewed the concept of recreation, sacrificed it at the altar of being busy, being productive, which has its merits, but I feel like the attachment of the word escapism to play is not entirely justified. It serves such an important role in so many contexts that I think that writing it off culturally, obviously not unilaterally, but in many ways, may have potentially been a significant misstep.
Yeah, because I do think a lot of these times, very often after a show, it's amazing how many audience members, an experience they have within the show is now making them reflect on experiences that they've had in their own life, which, I mean, that's something we hope all art has the capacity to do. But in the case of immersive theater, I feel like oftentimes that reflection is very active.
Because you've lived it, right? You're given an opportunity to actually take those steps to make that action. It makes me think of two things. One is related to when we were doing the Johnny cycle. We did the first chapter at the American Legion in Pasadena, and there's a scene where you, as the audience member, are cast as Johnny, right? So everyone refers to you as Johnny. That's how you're engaged, and you go and encounter Johnny's mother, and Johnny's mother essentially tells you not to go to war. She says, if you walk out of that door, don't you ever come back. And afterwards, there was an older man who was just, very tearful, but gratefully tearful. And we asked him, sort of what his experience had been. And he reflected that he was given the opportunity to say goodbye to his mother, because I believe he was a Vietnam vet. And he had gone away to war against his mother's wishes, and she had died while he was deployed. So it was an opportunity for him to have that catharsis with his mother in a way that he was never able to in his actual life.
Wow, that's really incredible.
Yeah.
It's really, really incredible.
Yeah. And that felt like, oh, good. We're doing something important here. We're doing something that is giving someone a real, authentic human experience that they need. And then just briefly, as we think about play as the impetus for the work that we do with the Kansas collection, that came about because of games. Noah Nelson of No Proscenium, he reached out to us because he was involved in helping to curate the night games portion of the Indiecade Festival hosted at USC. And they were looking for live events that could help populate that space. And so he said, do you want to engage in an experience involving game mechanics? So that was the very seed for the Kansas collection, thinking about our own experiences with video games and role-playing games and what was effective for us in those forms and how we could translate that into a live immersive medium.
Yeah. And I love that the inception of Kansas there came from other parts of the community in that way, and Noah's involvement and Indiecade's involvement. I think in so many ways it's just incredible to kind of watch from afar the tight-knit community of immersive creators in LA doing what you guys are doing, and all kind of in some ways like building off of each other's work and ideas and experiences. It's really cool to watch, like I said, from afar for the moment, but watching that happen as a social phenomena is a very long-winded way of saying that. Yeah. From there, I think if you guys are willing, we could jump into our Make It Immersive segment.
Okay, here we go.
So this one's going to be a little bit tricky for me because I'm not going to be able to do a whole lot insofar as setting a stage for where to start with this, because I'm not super familiar with any of these. Forgotten Realms more so, but Magicians and Age of Innocence, correct?
Yeah. I would say, funny enough, Magicians in a way kind of branches all these areas. It has a present day element. It jumps back in time to a specific kind of moment in history, and then it has a whole fantastical realm place.
It's true, and there's a status of whether you are a basically like pure blood wizard or like classically trained, or if you are a hedge witch, etc., so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a good palette.
All right. Yeah, let's start with that then. So in how would you put someone in that world in a way that could let them interact with all those pieces of that world as much as possible?
Well, I think, one of the, as with any kind of immersive story, there's many ways you can enter. And I think one of the ones that, at least for me, I'd be the most excited about is that, the show kind of functions on the idea of almost like there is a school that you can get accepted to be trained as a magician, sort of like magic college. And so, as an audience member, you could start with, and you don't, the school kind of picks you, you don't pick the school. So you could really begin someone's journey there. They get the invitation to come test for admission to the school.
And I think that's a trope that's really useful across forms. You see that in video games like Fallout, where you take the GOAT test, to determine your aptitude or play style. That feels like a really fun way to onboard into this universe, definitely, is through that exam.
Because then
I feel like that could be...
Oh, go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, you also have specializations within that. It's not just about, are you accepted? Do you have kind of magic living within you? But then what kind of magic are you most associated with too, which would be a fun way to start to possibly work on different narrative track experiences for different guests.
Yeah. And I feel like that the idea of getting a letter to Magic College would be a very accessible way to start an onboarding process too, given because there are other parts of the ethos of getting invitations to a magic school of one variety or another that the culture is very familiar with.
Yes. And what that makes me think about too, a lot of the work that we do is pretty analog because we aren't technologists, we aren't really designers by trade. We function within the realm of physical bodies and imagination. But there are a couple different routes you could go. As Genevieve mentioned before, with the magicians, so much of the magic is highly choreographed, and specifically it's highly choreographed related to your hands. And it makes me think about, with the improvements in the RFID chips and the way that they're able to activate with things in themed entertainment, if you have gloves or something of that nature that you could put on people's hands, it enables you to create physical activations within the space based on their gestures and based on their ability to follow your prompts and learning choreography and things of that nature, which is also really exciting.
Okay. Oh, that would be so cool. So I'm picturing all right, so you get this letter, you show up, you go through the testing process and maybe learn a little bit about yourself. And sorry.
I was going to say, and I think going, again, on the steps of it, you've got the letter, but just showing up at the space then becomes an experience. It's a hidden space. You only know how to find the entrance because you've been selected. So through this letter, so even just like the portal of entering into the experience becomes an experience in of itself, which is, I think, something, generatively we love to look at how each beat of it is special and is a moment, that's as an exciting moment as then getting tested to see if you have magic.
Yeah. That sense of discovery is so ingrained in what I feel like many others love about immersion, whether you're discovering a door or a hidden experience or something of that nature. So starting with that right out the gate would be wonderful.
And then we really like to try to create varied experiences. So the idea that there's different pieces of content and that not everyone gets to experience the same thing. So per kind of the conversation earlier, you test for magic and you find your specialty, which could lead you down a certain kind of narrative route with certain characters and people you meet. I also think, though, you could do the route for the person who tests and fails, and then from the outside has to find their way back in.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that would be an interesting journey. You automatically have a character who is framed as this underdog in some respects, and oh wow, that would be amazing. Wait, okay, so would this be a game or would it be a tracked narrative with certain degrees of agency within that track?
I think it would probably be the later for us. Obviously, other companies might choose to approach it differently, but we do really we love our narrative, and there's a certain amount of we want to guarantee that our audience will get to go on a kind of a fully kind of structured experience, that they get to have a certain amount of catharsis over the experience.
And we don't leave our audience alone a lot. right? So I think that's something that's different from like a puzzle experience or an escape room experience, whereby you're kind of left to figure it out. I think one of the hallmarks of what we do is the connections that you're forming with characters and forming with actors. So for each of those tracks, you would probably have a keystone performer and, you know, various other kind of side players in your experience, and they would help guide your emotional journey as you made your way through that piece.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Um, all right. So in the interest of time, I'm so sorry to do this, but is there a way that we could take Age of Innocence and Forgotten Realms and either choose one or merge them?
Hey, I'm happy to keep vamping on magicians.
Just a brainstorming session for us, basically, now.
Sci-fi, if you're listening, we are interested.
Well, I think so. One of the great things in the magicians kind of story spaces, so you, based on which magic you test into, there are different houses that you join. So you know, you test and you go move into your new dorm house, right? And there you have, you know, essentially two doors, right? And one can take you into the past, and you interact with people, you know, still in Earth in the past, and the other takes you to the fantasy realm.
Oh, okay, okay. So you are automatically presented like the whole thing is a bunch of choices that puts you in these different tracks and containers and such.
I would
Um,
say so, yeah.
yeah. And I'm not saying that as any kind of negative concept. I'm just like understanding what the process of going through that would look like, because that would be amazing.
Yeah, and you
Um,
know, you could always, again, if you wanted to guarantee that your audience got to experience a bit of every world, you know, you could always find a way narratively that if someone, let's say, went to the fantasy world, there's a problem there, and to solve that problem, they then have to go through a portal to you know, they travel back to Earth, but oh, oops, they're in the past now. They went to the wrong time. Um, you know, there are ways that you could still hit all of them.
I think also about the, um, you know, to tie in some of the stuff that I was talking about with Forgotten Realms, I'm interested in this hedge witch track, right? So for the people who fail and then have to find their way back in, is there a moment where, you know, the people who are in the school who are, you know, getting classically trained, they have some sort of problem that they need solved, but they can't do it on their own. They need the help of these kind of outsiders, this scrappy group that is coming by their knowledge of magic in a different way, and they maybe have some information that's essential to the problem at hand.
yeah, yeah. Um, so to wrap back around, what are those problems? Like what are the conflicts in that world that come to the forefront that the folks in that world have to contend with?
Well, I think if we wanted to take one of the big the problems actually from the series, it's that magic is disappearing and no one knows why. And without even without magic, people who know nothing about magic in the world, the muggles of the world, their lives are still affected if magic doesn't exist, and in a negative way. So trying to overcome that obstacle, and that's something that would band a lot of different groups together in the end to help each other, because it's a common problem.
But also a conflict that emerges from that is that it's a finite resource, right? So yeah, thinking about gamifying it a bit, you know, you can cast a certain spell or perform a certain action, but that depletes the overall ability of everyone to perform magic in the area. There's rationing that's taking place, so that's just kind of an interesting perspective on that as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because that could introduce a whole level of social dynamics insofar as who gets to cast the spell, who's better at
Hmm.
this given thing, or what party gets to use this finite resource.
Definitely, and create some hard but rewarding choice points for everybody, and some variance within the uh, performative experience. So you have alternate kind of results depending on what choices the guests make.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's really cool. All right, I'm sold. I'm ready. From there, would you guys be down to segue into a few rapid fire questions? As much as I want to keep poking around inside of that world.
Sure.
Awesome. So to start off with, what do you tell the uninitiated about immersive experiences? Those who either are showing up to a show completely dry or are, encountered in the outside world that just know nothing of it.
I often start with the fact that you are a character in the universe and you don't have any lines that you need to memorize, but you get to perform actions within this play, and your actions matter, and the characters will respond to you, move with you, touch you, and you have importance. So I use that as kind of a framework to differentiate it from a traditional proscenium play.
Definitely. You have importance. I like that.
Yeah, and I do think one of the key things is you are seen. You are always seen. Anything you do is seen, and it's part of that world and story. So there's not really anything you can step out and do aside. You are present in it, and your presence in it both impacts the performers and the story, but it also becomes part of the world for any other guests that are then in the story with you.
Yeah. Genevieve, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it really depends on who the person is that I'm speaking with, because sometimes you speak to someone who says, "Oh, you do immersive work. What is that? I don't know. I have no reference." So if I'm speaking to someone who's like, "Really educate me. I know nothing about this," I usually start with it is an experience that takes place all around you, that you are in the center of, that requires you to be an active participant. Depending on the show, how you actively participate could be very different. That's a stylistic question, but depending on the group, depending on the material. But it's not that it's something that you will not be able to sit back and observe the whole time, but that you will be contributing. Your presence alone contributes to the story.
Yeah, you are the center of this. It's I think often a tricky paradigm shift for folks who haven't encountered immersion at all to understand something where it's almost impossible to not be present within an entertainment experience. The idea of having to have some agency is, I think, sometimes confusing. People are like, "What do you mean?
Absolutely.
I get to be at the center of this. I get to be seen. I get to be important in some way. What does this mean?"
And that's actually something that's been interesting to see, just watching audiences come in and out. Sometimes people who've done immersive theater and really love it, they'll bring someone and kind of choose to surprise them by not preparing them at all. And that can really go one of two ways. I always suggest, you have to know someone really well to know that going in kind of blind to that they're going to be open and worth it for them. A lot of times I do think it's best, if you can, it's not that you have to have done it before, but, to have a little, particularly if someone's new to the form, it's not bad for them to have a little kind of prepping, a little chance to just kind of know what they're getting kind of into in a way. Because again, if someone just thinks they're going to go see a quote show or a play, that sets up a set of expectations that for some people, when that's broken, that's really exciting when they don't know what's going to happen. And for other people, if they don't know that's coming, it can be really, really unsettling. We've definitely kind of engaged how much to kind of say up front versus to let be discovered in the space. There are certain things that I think now more and more we do before an audience go in, give them some, some kind of some prep, right? Letting them know that, actors might be touching them, or that, they will be spoken directly to, just because in a lot of ways it's important for them to know, but it's also important for the actors to know the audience has, in a way, entered into an agreement about what the rules of the space are.
Yeah, most certainly. Most certainly. Surprise is a bit of a double-edged sword in that, right? And I think definitely preparing someone to the best of your ability without revealing too much is very, very important. I mean, that's the conversation of consent is a perpetual underpinning theme in all of this. It's like, do you know what you're getting into? It's not going to be crazy more often than not. Some experiences are certainly, but do you at least have a heads up insofar as what's coming your way? Um, what what's one immersive experience that you're particularly excited about the potential of? Outside of your guys' own work specifically, like something that you think speaks to a lot of new paths, new doors, new directions in the world of immersion.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So there's a couple. I mean, there's a big one and a small one. I think that the big elephant in the room that everyone's talking about right now, and obviously we're all watching to see kind of what happens with, is Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Is that level of immersion really going to live up to the hype? Are people going to be able to have full narrative experiences there? I know that Knott's Berry Farm has played before with the Ghost Town Alive, which, from what I understand, haven't had a chance to see it yet. But you can go and essentially participate in 8 hours of content. You can be there all day and play with different characters and go on missions and so on and so forth. And I'm curious to see how and if that emerges with the Star Wars property. And then, right now it's Hollywood Fringe Festival here in LA. And there have been a few shows that we've had the chance to go and see that have been kind of fun and exciting. I saw one 2 nights ago called The Pod, a very small show, 20-minute little nugget of a piece, written by Nick Reinwald Jones, who also created Safe House 77. And it's playing, first of all, in kind of a sci-fi space zone, which I haven't seen a lot of people do. And it's such a small nugget of an experience, but it feels both complete and leaving you wanting more. Nick has seen a bunch of our work, and I can definitely see some of the lessons we learned through the structuring of our episodic productions of Kansas Collection at work in the way that they're framing up kind of the follow-up videos and things of that nature. So I'm very excited to see what happens with that piece as well. Those are my two.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'll say for me, it's a little bit. I'm still really curious about kind of where the VR train is going. I'm someone who, initially, without ever having done any VR, I took a kind of hard stance against it. I'm a little embarrassed to say now, because being someone who makes immersive theater, I put a lot of value in the live experience and in the tangible kind of physical world. That said, my first experience, in the VR headset was pretty exciting and pretty transformative. And I think, it's a really cool piece of technology, but when that piece of technology can really, again, it goes to this idea of what is your role within that world. I've now gotten the chance to do a lot of different kind of VR games. And, one of the big things is, well, I've been in a lot where it's a really beautiful world, unless there's a specific and deliberate way to interact that actually has impact on why I'm there and kind of what I'm trying to do. The amount of attention or interest it can hold is nominal. But I do think it's a really exciting space, in terms of accessibility there's so much potential, and so I'm excited to see where that goes, particularly kind of pushing narrative.
Yeah, certainly. I definitely had similar preconceptions about VR, and still do to some degree, in the world of social interaction. But it is surprisingly more impactful than, or at least I expected going into it. Like, wow, that was much more positively disorienting than I was anticipating.
Yeah, and I do have to say, I think that you kind of jumped on it. I don't know that I've ever had my shared experiences of it have weirdly, the shared part is it functions in the way when you do an immersive theater piece for an audience of one, where I might do it and then you might do it and then we can talk about it, but I haven't had an experience where I'm in the VR space yet, kind of sharing the experience with other people in
Yeah,
a kind of successful way.
yeah, certainly. Um, all things to come. We shall see what happens there.
Yes, I'm sure.
I would say, I don't have a specific production right now just to speak about, but one thing that I have been feeling over the course of several months has to do with the community of immersive creators in LA, and you touched on this earlier, actually. There are so many immersive creators now here in LA, and the work is getting stronger and stronger, but the work is still staying pretty small. It's not running for a long period of time. It's not really leaving LA in this moment. And I just have this feeling, and this is something I think I've mentioned before, that we're going to start to see more and more collaborations between different groups, different immersive groups working together to kind of, I feel like there's going to be some immersive super group that's created in LA. And in a way that we can hopefully compete with the bigger shows that are happening in New York, and certainly the shows in New York and the UK that are getting maybe a larger recognition. I feel like it's going to happen in LA soon, but I feel like the way it's going to happen is through collaboration, and that is something that our company, especially, we revel in collaboration. That's what I think makes us so strong as a group, and I can only imagine what will happen when some of these other groups start to pool their resources together and start playing together as well. And I'm excited to see, and I really hope that does come to fruition, and I'm excited to see where it might lead LA as a landscape.
I think there's definitely a lot of potential for that. Speaking to, say, Meow Wolf as a model for something that started as this artist collaborative, but then has evolved into something different, more what have you. I mean, they just launched their podcast and they're still trying to figure that out too. But that, yes, it's a very different medium. But at the same time, it's like that there's a model for it to some degree. There's a precedent that's been set that we know it's possible to do things like that in such incredible variety and collaborative form. So as I think will probably be our final official question here, I would ask you guys, and this might be a somewhat familiar question to either you or those listening, but if you could have a metaphorical billboard getting the message out to billions, what would it say? Could be either something of your own origin or a quote if that is a more accessible thing for you at the moment.
I guess in some ways that you see towns do ad campaigns for all the amazing things that you can do there, as Genevieve talked about collaboration and the amazing work that so many different companies are doing. I would want just to showcase the wide variety of options that there are available in the form of immersion. So I'm envisioning just a get immersed billboard and like the variety of different worlds and doorways that open up to different experiences that that you could partake in, just as a kind of general message for everyone who's creating in this form.
Yeah, yeah. That I feel like would be really meaningful and really tricky to capture. I want to see that graphically represented very badly, actually. That would be really cool.
Maybe it's better as like a 30-second little web video, but I don't know. I'm working with it.
We could see we'll superimpose an AR option onto said billboard.
That's right. Hold up your device and unlock new worlds.
I will say though, I think that phrase "get immersed," it has a ring to it and it's catchy. You could do like a series of billboards, and each company kind of could have its "get immersed" billboard.
Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of that. I'm definitely a big fan of that. It's the new tagline. It's the immersive movement. Get immersed, guys. All right. Any other thoughts on the billboard? And it's okay if not. It's okay if not. Nothing's popping in mind. That is totally fine.
I mean, I would definitely want to make sure we had a get immersed with the Speakeasy Society billboard.
Yes.
Though even there, it's hard to know what that 100% looks like, right? Because we're creating across multiple genres and styles of interaction and time periods and looks and aesthetics. So yeah, I mean, to your point, Nathaniel, the how do you essentialize that into a static image when immersion is by nature something that's fluid and moving around you? But it would be an interesting challenge for sure to see how people choose to represent.
I feel like instead of one big, large billboard that gets seen by the whole of the world, I would rather have millions and millions of tiny of our tiny logos posted everywhere. So that you would see enough of them and be like, what is that? I want to know what that is. And that you would eventually be able to find out who we are through those tiny little logos. But like, is there a way that they could be hidden everywhere, all over the world? Like, and no matter where you are, you would somehow come across our logo and be intrigued enough that it would drive you to find us online to figure out what exactly we were.
I like it. The grassroots billboard approach.
It's funny that you bring that up. Genevieve and I actually met a long time ago in New York, and we met working through a theater company that was a bit of a more traditional experimental theater company. But I don't know if you remember, that was one of our advertising campaign ideas for a show, was that we were going to print all these stickers up and we were just going to put them up everywhere, and knowing that they'd be taken down and that it was a little illegal. But that we were hopeful that, if you put it up on the subway and stuff, that if people saw it enough, they would finally someday like go to the website and like see what it was.
So really, I'm just recycling like 16-year-old ideas at this point.
But also, I don't know that we ever fully acted on that idea. So maybe it's just ready to be done now. Also, I would say the world is more ready for it, because at that point, it was before everyone had a smartphone. People weren't carrying the internet with them 24/7, where now I do think something like that, like people would have the ability to look it up right then and there.
Yeah, most definitely. And I'm frustrated that QR codes are not as used as much as they should be, because they could be so cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, that makes me think of like the old Black Eyed Peas music video, "Where's the Love?" Everybody's going around grassrootsing the question mark thing that's plastered on the wall, or on all the places. Yeah, and that actually might be a perfect way to transition into talking about what you guys have coming up. I'm incredibly excited to hear about what's in the horizon for you guys.
Yeah. That's great. Well, we just closed the Kansas collection. So that was a 10-chapter episodic series that had evolved over the course of 3 years, and we had our finale performance, The Portal, which ended at the end of May, beginning of June. So any normal and sane person might take a breath after that, but we are neither of those things. So instead, we're launching into several projects. We recently announced a crowdfunding campaign for a piece that we have coming up in the fall called the Johnny Cycle, which is our adaptation of the Dalton Trumbo novel Johnny Got His Gun, mixed with elements of Trumbo's own life. For those who aren't familiar, Trumbo was blacklisted during the McCarthy era for being a communist. But during the time of his blacklist, where he wasn't able to work as a Hollywood screenwriter, which is how he was really making his money, he ghost wrote Spartacus, The Brave One, and he actually posthumously received his Oscar for The Brave One, which won Best Screenplay later on. So we're very excited to be bringing this piece back in kind of a revised form. This was also a piece that we had done as a 3-year investigation that had taken the form of 3 installments. But we are kind of taking all of our favorite and most effective moments from that 3-year investigation and combining it into one standalone piece that will be premiering this fall at the Mountain View Mausoleum in Altadena. So we are raising funds for that currently, and if
Very
anyone
excited
feels
for
moved
that.
to donate, by all means, please do. There are some, there's some perks there for early ticket access and VIP experiences, things of that nature. So, yeah.
And I don't know, I'll cut this out if you guys would prefer it, but I encountered some old videos that you guys had recorded and posted on Vimeo of certain snippets of the Johnny collection, which was really, really interesting to kind of get a peek inside of that world. And if
Yeah,
you guys
no,
are all right with that, I will
that's
link
totally
that in
fine.
the
You
show
can share
notes.
that. In fact, the video from the 3rd installment at Mountain View is kind of the cornerstone of the Indiegogo page. So we're perfectly fine sharing those videos and the previous work that had been done to give a sense of tone. Not everything will be identical, and it's with those first 2 videos we won't be performing in those venues, but it gives you a sense of kind of the world in which the work is being created.
Yeah. And that first person viewpoint is, I mean, filming immersive experiences is tricky, and obviously a lot of creators don't want to have the inside of what's going on in their experiences even demonstrated. So it was really, really cool to see you guys having taken a shot at that. Yeah, so that will be linked in the show notes. What you said, a multitude of projects, as of course, as if that's not enough, but I heard potentially that there might be some collaboration going on with Two Bit Circus.
That is correct. So we are currently gearing up to open a show at Two Bit Circus. It's in a private space there, and going kind of back to our roots. It's an intimate piece. It's for at most 2 people at a time, but it's exploring kind of a circus world of the 1920s.
Ooh, fascinating. That's
Yeah.
really, really cool. I think I saw, I don't remember where I caught it. I feel like I saw some mention of it on their site or somewhere in the depths of the interwebs. And I was like, oh, yes, please. That's going to be lovely.
Um,
Yeah, that we're very excited for that as well. Sorry, Julianne, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, so the show's called Under the Bigtop because we love doing shows in series and installments. It will be in installments, but each show is a standalone one. So the first one is called Atlas, and that experience in of itself is a standalone show. But if you saw the other installments, they will speak to each other in certain ways.
Wonderful. And of course, once again, links to all of this goodness will be in the show notes for those interested and looking about. Yeah, from there, where can people find you?
All over LA.
And if you're on the internet, you can find us at www.speakeasysociety.com or on Facebook at the Speakeasy SOC, as well as on Instagram and Twitter also as the Speakeasy SOC.
Right on. Well, wonderful. Anything else in the sphere of your guys' work that you care to mention as we find ourselves coming towards the end of our chat here?
Well, I think one of the big things that kind of characterizes our work is, as mentioned before, we definitely do a lot of collaboration, and our work is definitely very much narrative and character driven. We work with an incredibly talented bunch of actors, many of whom have been working on shows with us since the beginning. We're actually, as a company, am I correct that we're about 7 years old now? We're coming up on our 7th birthday.
We are.
Coming up on 7.
And during that time, and I might get my number wrong here, which is unfortunate because I literally just typed it in an email. We're on show what?
I think we're on 22 or 23, something of that nature. So
22, 23 original shows, counting remounts, we're closer to 33. But again, many of these actors have been working on shows with us throughout our history. They're incredibly talented. I think they've been really helping grow the form of immersive acting. And one of the big things is with each and every show, we feel like we've learned a lot, and we are definitely, I think we have honed a style that's specifically ours. We're always looking to try new things and explore new kind of ways of considering what it means to be immersed and interacting. But I do think part of what we love about it is that we feel like there's always something new to discover within the form.
Certainly. And on the note of discovery, of course, if the producers of The Magicians are out there, give them a shout out, you guys.
Yeah, by all means. And just to springboard off of what Julianne said too, I mean, there's the three of us are the co-artistic directors, but there are other folks that work as part of kind of the administrative team, making sure that everything kind of stays up in the air in between projects. And we'd be remiss without mentioning those people. So we have John Henningsen, who is our producing director. Chris Porter, who is an associate artistic director who writes many of our words and all of our music. Michael Bates, another associate artistic director who was a longtime performer with us, who then stepped into a more creative and generative role. And then Andrew Leah, who is our production manager. And Andrew and John have really helped us scale up what we're able to accomplish technologically. So for people who saw the portal itself and all of the tech related to that would not have been possible without their help. So just want to give them a shout out as well.
Wonderful. All right, you guys. Well, on that note, I want to say thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. Thank you guys for coming on the show, and I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Of course. Guys, I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day. Calling all immersive adventurers, explorers, connoisseurs, and artists. The immersive revolution is just beginning. All that is to say, we would love any feedback that you might have on the show. What do you want to hear more of, less of? Anyone in particular you'd like us to have on the show? I would love to hear your thoughts. So please rate us, review us, or just drop us a line on the website at immersionnation.com. I always love having conversations about this wide and wild world that we are both living in and creating. Once again, this is the Immersion Nation podcast. Thank you for joining us in this adventure.